I'm Mike Hannewald, field agronomist with Beck's Hybrids, and unfortunately right now across much of the state of Ohio, our fields look a lot like this one, unplanted and wet. And this wet weather pattern that we're in with continued rains has made it difficult to get much if any, planting progress made in the last few weeks. And so while farmers across Ohio are all over the board in the amount they have planted, there's two main things to think about is what do we need to do for the planting that has yet to happen as we move to the second half of May? And then what do we do about what is already planted? And I'll wrap up the video with a quick comment on wheat as well. So starting off, what do we need to do for what has yet to be planted? As we move into the second half of May, especially once we get past the 15th and 20th, it's time to start thinking about increasing our soybean planting populations. That's the main thing. With soybeans, they're going to have less time to grow. It's less time to develop vegetatively, less height, fewer nodes to those plants, and so less yield potential from each individual plant. And so therefore we want to increase our planting population to make up for that. And so my recommendation is that after the 20th of May to be increasing your soybean planting populations by 10,000 seeds per week at that point, and topping out at 200,000. If you're already in the upper 180, 190, 200, you probably don't need to go a whole lot higher than that. But increasing that from those lower populations, if you normally be planting 130, 140, 150, maybe increasing that a little bit again. More plants so that we get hopefully just as many nodes per acre and then just as many pods per acre, but we need more plants to do that because each plant will have less potential because of less time. Also moving forward as we get into later planting, thinking on the side on corn, late planted corn. We've seen good success with good yield potential of late planted corn. It is still very important though that you plant into ideal conditions. And actually PFR has shown it's more important to plant into ideal conditions later in the season. And I know that our impatience can catch up with us and we feel like we're up against the wall and we need to get going and need to get stuff in the ground. But being patient, waiting the extra day for the ground to dry out if we get the window to do so, pays bigger dividends as we get later. When it's warmer during the day, there's more growth per day. And so for a corn plant that emerges 2 days after the one next to it, that's going to be a bigger difference in growth stage and therefore a bigger yield penalty for that inconsistent emergence as we get later on in the season than what it was when we planted early, where it was cooler as that corn was emerging, and so you had less growth per day and those late plants weren't quite as far behind. Second consideration with corn is what maturity do we continue to plant as we move into the second half of May and potentially into June. And so we've actually done a study with this in PFR. And so if you take a look on your screen, you'll see the results of that study. So this was done at our Atlanta, Indiana location as well as in London, Ohio. And you can see the data there of comparing different maturities of corn planted during the first week of June. And you can see that we're seeing the highest return on investment with that fullest season hybrid at 112 day. Now, the big thing is, well, what about wetter corn in the fall? We factored that into that number. That's why we didn't show you yield. We showed you high return on investment, and that is factoring in those moisture drying charges as well. And so that's something to keep in mind, that sticking with the plan of what hybrid you intended to plant originally is going to be the best way to go, provided that it can mature before frost. And so if you're planting something extreme that's way out of zone, you might need to switch to something earlier. But for the most part, if we're planting into the first week of June, sticking with our original plan is going to be more profitable, even if we have higher drying bills come fall. So keep that in mind. Moving on, what do we do about the stand that we currently have, corn or soybeans already planted out in the field as we evaluate those? You know, with the cool weather we've had in the first half of May, our corn and beans have been very slow to emerge. And we've seen them emerge slowly. We've seen inconsistent emergence, and things just aren't as nice as what we'd like to see in a lot of cases. However, those crops have a tremendous benefit in the fact that they were still planted in April. And so I will tolerate a thinner stand, especially in soybeans. I'll tolerate a thinner stand planted in April over a thicker stand planted in the end of May or even into June if that's when our window opens up. So take the time, evaluate those stands, make sure if you have a crusting situation that you're finding a way to break that crust open either with a rotary hoe or running the planter back over the field or vertical tillage. we've seen time and time again that that's a really profitable practice to do, and usually can be successful. But evaluate those stands. However, don't make the decision to replant until you're done planting the first time, because we've got a lot more acres and a lot more potential yield to gain by getting our first round of planting complete first than what we do of what we might potentially gain by replanting or thickening up a stand. So once you're done replanting, or once you're done planting the first time, then you can consider going back and replanting and make that final determination on stand count. So soybeans, we'll start there. Our PFR testing, you can see it on your screen. We've seen that 70,000 is enough, especially if it's early planted in April or the first half of May. You can grow really good beans even with a thinner final stand. And so I would encourage you, while 70,000 can look really thin, especially from the road, that's going to be enough to maximize your potential. And again, that thin stand planted early is going to do better than a full stand planted late. If you would get a full stand, remember, a replant is not guaranteed. So if you've got holes where there's, wet holes and such that have nothing, obviously you can go patch those in. But if you've got that stand of 70,000 or more, I'd leave those beans alone. If you get thinner than that and you want to go out and thicken them up, you can do that. I know that that's one of the most difficult decisions in farming to do, of where do you thicken it up and where don't you. But that 70,000 is kind of our minimum threshold of final stand that we want. Now, moving on to corn. You can see the results in your screen. We've got 5 years of data of corn. We're finding that somewhere between 20 and 24,000 is that break point as far as where we need to consider replanting corn. Now, unlike soybeans you can thicken up a stand, and I'd encourage you, if you need more beans out there, always thicken it up. Don't destroy those original plants, because those are going to produce the most yield. In corn, outside of just patching in some wet holes, you're going to need, the best practice is to terminate the whole stand and start over again, so you don't have corn at two massively different growth stages competing against one another. Now, that 20 to 24,000 is kind of what we're looking at there. But the other factor you need to take into consideration when you're looking at that is, what's the hybrid that I have and what is the ear flex potential? Your seed dealer should be able to help you with that as far as understanding those. And because our hybrids we have some hybrids that have tremendous flex potential and will make up for those holes in the stand. While that's not ideal to have a less than perfect stand, you can definitely, you might be better off leaving that thinner stand, letting those ears flex out, than what you would be to tear up and start over. Because again, that replant pass is not always guaranteed that it's going to be any more successful than what the first one does. And at least with the first pass, we've got the benefit of early planting on our side. So just some considerations there for both corn and soybeans for evaluating the stands that you have. Again, prioritize what you have left to plant, and then evaluate what you have out there for what's already planted and make that decision. Last comment is on wheat. So make sure you're keeping an eye on your wheat fields. We can be really focused on corn and soybeans right now, but wheat is going to be getting close to that flowering stage, especially in northern Ohio. Southern Ohio may already be there, but watch those heads to come out and hit that flowering time frame with that fungicide. I've already been getting the question, is it worth that fungicide pass with lower wheat prices? And I say yes. We've actually seen our most consistent response to fungicide in our PFR trials is in wheat. And so hitting that flowering, it will help you gain yield. Our lowest gains that we've seen in PFR, we've seen about a 4 to 9 bushel range of gains with the fungicide in our testing. Even at 4 bushels, you're at least breaking even with that fungicide pass in a lot of cases, and that will decrease any worries of vomitoxin as well. So still strongly encourage that. If you have any questions about any of these or any other agronomic topics, or want help in making some of these difficult decisions, feel free to reach out to myself or your local Beck's representative, and we'd be happy to help. Best of luck as you wrap up planting, and stay safe out there.